Here is a video going over the diagrams then involved in oogenesis, looking at it from a visual standpoint. So remember that both spermatogenesis and oogenesis start with a diploid cell called a germ cell. So that's going to have the full 46 chromosomes in it. These cells are going to divide using mitosis, and they're going to produce other germ cells. So they'll go through the cell cycle and produce identical cells. But they will also produce cells that will be destined to become gametes or sex cells, okay? So in this case, it's also going to produce these cells here, which are called oogonium, okay? Oogonium. These oogonium are going to go through the cell cycle, and they're going to replicate their chromosomes, and then they're going to become primary oocytes. So that's going to be the next stage here. So this is going to be a primary oocyte. Now, during oogenesis, primary oocytes go through meiosis 1. So I'm just going to put a 1 here for that first stage of meiosis. But something very different happens than it does during spermatogenesis. The primary oocyte is going to split to form two different products. One of them is going to be a large secondary oocyte, and the other is a small cell called the first polar body. So the first polar body we'll put right here. It's a smaller cell, so that'd be the first polar body. And the second one then, the big one, is going to be right here, the secondary oocyte. Why does the primary oocyte divide unequally? Well, many organisms use this process to produce really large nutrient-rich ovums, and they plan on nourishing a growing fetus with all these extra nutrients instead of dividing into smaller ones. So basically, they're making a cell that's going to be able to nourish that growing embryo, that fertilized egg, and they feel like, our bodies feel like we can do that better by kind of consolidating our resources into this one big cell, and then you have that primary or that first polar body that is produced. The secondary oocyte is going to perform meiosis 2. Okay, so we'll put a 2 here for meiosis 2. But it again is going to divide unequally. It's going to produce a large, put it in red here, a large ootid, whoops, it's right here, and then a smaller cell, which is called a secondary polar body, and that's going to be right here, okay? So again, both of these cells are going through meiosis 1, but when they're going through them, unlike when we made sperm, they're doing it unevenly, so we're not getting the same product. We're still getting two cells, but we're getting one that's really big, and then we're getting smaller ones, which are called polar bodies. The ootid will eventually then develop into a mature ovum. Okay, so that's what this one would be here, the mature ovum. So again, we started over here with the germline cells. They're going to go through the cell cycle we talked about last week, mitosis, replicate itself, and they're going to make more germ cells, and they're going to make oogonium, okay, which are going to be destined to be a sex cell. That's going to go through mitosis, so copying and making identical cells in order to make a primary oocyte. This primary oocyte then is going to go through meiosis, the first stage of meiosis, and it's going to produce two cells, one small one, which is called the first polar body. The second one is going to be a big secondary oocyte. And then that's going to go through meiosis 2 and divide the chromosomes even more into two cells, one of which is going to be really big, called the ootid, and one of which is going to be really small, which is called the secondary polar body. Polar bodies cannot be used for fertilization purposes, okay? They'll just get reabsorbed back into the body. This is going to end up developing into that mature ovum.